Hello and welcome back to mylesleaTV. I'm so lucky I'm able to talk to my friend Andrew Bonneau this morning, who's an incredible artist based in Cairns in Australia. And you'll be able to see how amazing his work is when you explore his website. And you'll see a link at the bottom of the screen just now. So hello Andrew, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks Jonathan. Yeah, good to see you. How are
It's
you?
amazing to see you face to face. The last time was in Rome, wasn't it? In 2019.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it does feel like a while ago now, but yeah, wonderful time.
I know.
Yeah, that was great.
The reason we met in Rome was because we met on Instagram, didn't we? And I
Yeah.
saw your incredible paintings. And you told me about this award you'd won through the William Fletcher Foundation. Was that in Cairns or Sydney? How did that come about?
Yeah, that's based in Sydney. I think it's been running for 10 years or maybe even 20 years. It's a foundation that gives scholarships and funding to promising artists. So they have a few residencies and then they have sort of cash that they give away. But the Rome residency is more recent. I think I was the sixth Rome scholar, and it's every 2 years,
Really?
so it's relatively recent. But yeah, with the British School at Rome. So yeah, I got.
So when I heard that you were going to be in Rome for 3 months, I go to Rome every year. I go to Italy every year. I thought I'm going to coincide my trip so that I can meet you and spend some time watching you doing some drawings, because the plan was to do some studies, wasn't it, in some museums and galleries.
Yeah, that's right.
And we did. We ended up spending quite a lot of time in the Capitoline Museum and Palazzo Altomps, I think. You'll remember more of this than me. And luckily I took some photographs of you at work doing these exquisite drawings. Tell me a little bit about them. I have this funny feeling that there's some sort of inspiration from Proudhon, the French neoclassical artist. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, I have a lot of different influences. Proudhon's definitely in there. You're probably responding to that because of the white chalk and charcoal on a mid-tone paper, which I was using quite a lot.
Yes, I love the mid-tone.
Proudhon has kind of excelled at that type of drawing. So yeah, I would often use a mid-tone paper, but there's a long lineage of artists going to Rome and drawing antiquities. Going back to the Renaissance, and people I was thinking of were Peter Paul Rubens and people like that. He's done some wonderful drawings of Roman sculptures, and yeah, I wanted to do the same thing. So
yeah, that's what fascinated me about the fact that you were going back through this tradition of artists who say won the Prix d'Or in France, or many British and French artists would have gone to Rome, wouldn't they, in the 18th century and the 19th century, and studied there for what period of 1 or 2 years perhaps, and then gone back to their own countries. So you're really sort of going into this traditional classical European tradition, aren't you? Why is that? Because did you just feel when you were in Australia that your reference points were more European? Was that what it was about?
I suppose so. I mean, I've always been attracted by the old masters and just been incredibly impressed by them and overwhelmed by the skill and the beauty and the sort of gravity that those paintings and sculptures have. And so it's kind of obvious that I would want to do that. Yeah, I think since childhood I've wanted to draw and paint like that, and yeah, the opportunity to to go to Rome came up, and I thought this is like a pilgrimage to the source of this kind of art.
Was it your first time in Rome then?
No, I'd been once before. I went with my wife and our son when he was I think he was 2. He turned 2 in Rome. So yeah, I'd been to Florence and Venice before, but yeah, second time in Rome. There's so much to see there, as you know. You need several trips.
Oh my God, it was my favourite city. Well, like I say, I've been going every year for about 20 years, and I'm still discovering things.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I just want to show a few of these images that you produced when you were in Rome. They are breathtaking.
Thank you.
And I saw you preparing the mid-tone ground in the studio, which was made available to you by the British School at Rome, which is amazing. I think it's in a Lutyens building near the Borghese Gardens.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky. I was able to have dinner there with you a couple of evenings and meet the other students and people who were studying there, postgrad people. And so you put this mid-tone on, and then you started producing these absolutely breathtaking drawings of sculptures, really iconic sculptures. You'd obviously done a lot of research about this. I remember you were doing a drawing of a sort of granite figure that looked like a satyr or a faun. I have this funny feeling it might have been from Hadrian's villa in Tivoli.
Yeah, that's
Can
right.
you tell me about a few of those that you did? Because
yes.
I'm going to show them on the screen.
Sure. Yeah, no, I remember well. That's it's a type of black marble, and yeah, it was from Hadrian's villa. For people probably know, Hadrian was a great lover of everything Greek, and really reinvigorated the arts in Rome at that time. So there was a lot of remaking of of sculpture, remaking of older styles and things like that, and a burst of creativity. So yeah, that's a centaur, and it's a pair of two centaurs. There's sort of the young one, and then there's a dying centaur as well, which is just across from that in the Capitoline Museum. And I'd seen a drawing by Rubens of the old centaur, which I loved, and he actually used the torso from that centaur for a figure of Christ years later in one of his paintings, which is quite interesting to see how he connects those things together. And I thought I would draw that one, but I ended up being attracted to the sort of more vital, energetic young centaur, and yeah, quite difficult to draw. I think I probably spent about 4 full days grappling with that statue, but I managed to get it right, I think. I'm quite happy with it. So.
But the proportions are absolutely immaculate. Is that the sight size method that you learnt in New York, perhaps?
No, I mean, not sight size. I mean, for people that don't know, sight size drawing is when you have the thing you're drawing, whether it's a portrait or a statue, here, and then you have your canvas next to it, and you stand back at a certain distance so you see them at the same size, and you can make marks and compare. The way I approach it is more comparative, so you can draw it at any scale. So I could draw a portrait this big or this big. It doesn't really matter what size you draw it at, it's the relative proportions that matter. So you kind of decide, and then you figure out what the halfway point is, what the quarters are, you compare height to width, and you look at angles and shapes and figure out how everything sort of fits together in that way. So yeah, there's a bit more freedom in that.
It's
incredible.
incredible.
You can do it at any size.
I want to really show all of those drawings that you did in Rome, because I think as a set, they are breathtaking. I've always said that. I think you should always try and keep them together. Personally, I would love prints of them. It would bring back such amazing memories to have a whole set of those prints in a line on the wall at home. But tell me about some of the other sculptures that you did. I remember you did the dying Gaul.
Yes.
And there were some other sort of more columnar statues. Tell me about those, because I'll show them on screen.
Sure.
About
Yeah, the dying Gaul is in. I think it's in the next room actually from from that centaur that I drew in the Capitoline Museum. Look, there's so much to learn from these sculptures, and I usually try a couple of different angles to show the variety that's within them. Again, all I'm remembering is how difficult they were to draw when you mentioned them. But the result, I think the result.
You made it look very easy.
So.
What I would do, I'd go for a wander around the museum. I would walk around the museum, or I'd go to another museum, and then I'd come back maybe 3 or 4 hours later, and these miraculous drawings had appeared, subtle drawings had appeared that really looked three-dimensional. I know I'm talking with such enthusiasm about this just because I absolutely adore them. You also did some pictures in the external views, didn't you, in the gardens at the Borghese? There's a beautiful, which is that temple you see over the lake. That's beautiful.
Yeah, for people who know, in the Borghese Gardens, there's a lake, and within the lake is a neoclassical temple for Asclepius. So it's it's an 18th century reimagining of a Greek temple, but there's a statue of Asclepius in the middle, who was the god of healing and medicine for the ancient Greeks. And I think in the ancient world there were often sanctuaries to Asclepius where people would go for healing and things like that, and they were often secluded and in places of nature with lakes and things. So it kind of evokes that. I mean, I remember going there the first time I went to Rome, and it's just magical. It blew me away. I thought, wow, this is really. It's like another world, and so I made a point of making
it's an extraordinary place because the water is vivid green, which is slightly odd.
Yeah.
And I remember as I was walking around it, there were lots of turtles, or are they tortoises, tiny turtles wandering amongst the bushes. It feels quite exotic and strange. But then people on boats sort of sailing by in front of it. But it is a magical spot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me think of some of the other sculptures that you did. I think there was one of was it a Gaul committing suicide? It was a figure group, which was another one of, was it?
Sure,
Massimo?
yeah. I was
Palazzo Massimo.
Yeah, that's not the Palazzo Massimo. That's in the Palazzo Altemps. But yeah, I was just thinking of that one. That's really monumental sculpture. I mean, it's I guess you'll be showing it, but it's it's an incredible sculpture from every angle. Yeah, it's I think it dates to the original dates to the time of Julius Caesar. That's what it says on the plaque.
Really?
But it's a Roman copy, obviously. It's not an original.
Amazing.
But yeah, very dynamic, very heroic. I mean, he's a Gaul sort of committing suicide at the result of being invaded by the Romans. So there's a kind of dignity about it. But I really just love the sort of the dynamic energy of that sculpture. And if you're studying the human figure, if you're doing life drawing, things like that, which I do, and I'm interested in pursuing, you really can't go past studying the ancient Greeks and the Roman sculpture, because the way they idealize the figure and sense of proportion, harmony, and dynamism, it's just unsurpassed. So, yeah.
I've got something exciting to tell you, Andrew. On Sunday, a sculpture's being delivered to my home, and we found it for sale online, and it's called the knife scraper.
I know that one. Yeah.
And it's it's in the in Florence in the Tribune, the full scale one, which is actually a Greek sculpture in bronze that was copied in the 2nd century AD in marble, lost, discovered in the 16th century in Italy, and sort of mended. All the fingers are broken. They've been put back together by a 16th century sculptor. And then I bought a sort of half-meter high sculpture which was made, a miniature version of it, in the 19th century, early 19th century, and it's being delivered on Sunday. And it's exquisite. And the reason I responded to it, because it sort of incorporates that sort of pie shape, what do they call that? The unfurling of the body that you see the golden mean, that's right.
Sure.
So, like you, I've had this incredible response to classical forms, and usually the things that have the most resonance, the ones that go back furthest, aren't they? You suddenly discover this is not just a Renaissance figure. It relates to a Roman sculpture, which was a copy of a Greek sculpture.
That's right.
And this resonance comes through, this distillation of compositional power comes through from the deep past. That's another thing that we started talking about, wasn't it? We were talking about mythology, because of the pictures that you were depicting. You weren't just interested in them aesthetically, were you? You really know a lot about the mythology of it. And you introduced me to the writer, was it Joseph Campbell?
Yeah.
That's who seemed to have inspired you a lot. Tell me a little bit about which book it was that started you becoming interested in mythology?
Well, I mean, there's been a lot since childhood. I've been interested in that, but yeah, Joseph Campbell. His famous book is *The Hero with a Thousand Faces*, which really sort of put him on the map as an important figure. I think it was written in the 30s, but yeah, he talks about the sort of the monomyth and the commonalities between all hero stories across the world and through culture, and the various things that can happen on the hero's journey and the myriad ways it can unfold. And I just found it interesting that there's a sort of common human theme behind all of the world's cultures, even though they seem different from the outside. And so, yeah, that sort of got me interested in the ancient Greeks at a young age, and also, Indian mythology and things like that. But you can see this pattern everywhere. It's in almost every story. But yeah, what you were saying before about the sort of lineage of of form within art. I mean, it really does go back, and it kind of echoes, and it feels like a connection between generations. And yeah, you know, when I went to Rome, I thought I had a sort of list of things I wanted to do. I wanted to look at Renaissance painting and make some copies and draw Renaissance sculptures and Baroque things. Look at Bernini and things like that. But once I started looking at the ancient Roman and Greek art, I just felt like, well, this is really what I should be looking at, you know, because this is what the people in the Renaissance were looking at, and which led to the Renaissance.
Yes.
So trying to go back to the source as much as possible, you know, it's a fascinating.
It was such
thing.
a heady experience, wasn't it? Being in Rome with you, with somebody who's another artist who really appreciates the classical world, it's actually one of the high points of my life.
Oh, wow.
I really enjoyed it.
I did too.
I think I was there for about a week. It was such an exciting experience, and also to have conversations like this in these incredible environments, walking through the forum site. I think you did a painting, didn't you, of the forum site? I don't know whether you sent me
Yeah,
that.
I did.
Did you do an oil painting?
Yeah, I did. I think I've sent you that. If I haven't, I'll make sure you get it. But yeah, that was great. It's funny. I was at the Capitoline Museums, and I didn't really know the geography of Rome that well. I didn't really know where I was. Now it's obvious. You're on the Capitoline Hill where the Temple of Zeus used to be. It was kind of the center of Rome at one point. But anyway, I was at the Capitoline Museum, and I came out and I thought, I've got a bit of time. What should I draw? I thought I might draw this column, and then I walked down a little bit further, and I had this amazing vista of the whole Roman Forum, sort of looking east. And I thought, okay, well, this is good. So I started. It's just spectacular.
And you did that from. There's a sort of, what's that building? Is it called a tabularium? I think it might be. There's a facade which faces the forum, which has some arcading in it. Some of it's infilled, but that's original Roman arcading. And that would have been on the Capitoline, that's right. So the view that you were seeing from there would be more or less, apart from the fact that all the temples are ruined, is really more or less the view you would have seen back, until about, 400 AD? You know, it would have been a view of the forum site that you could have possibly seen in the distant past.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Where else did you spend time? Which other museums did you spend time in?
Palazzo Massimo I spent a lot of time in, probably about 10 or 11 days, just full days there drawing. I'd spend 2 or 3 days on each statue. I did a really nice drawing of a Dionysus, a bearded Dionysus with big robes.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking about.
I think I've included that. Yeah,
so powerful.
Yeah. Look, it's so fun to connect with these sculptures, drawing them. I mean, you feel like you're sort of tuning your attention into the sculptor that made it, and also what they were thinking and what these sculptures meant for the time. It's a great way in. I mean, to understand the culture, not intellectually, but aesthetically. It's very important.
I think that's you see that in the end product. There's a great depth to the images and an understanding. You can tell you're not just using them as subjects or still lives. Although I was looking at your still lives recently, and they are breathtaking. You did painting and a charcoal study of a skull, which I think are possibly the best studies of skulls I've ever seen. I'm not exaggerating.
Okay, well, thank you.
Honestly, is it pencil or charcoal? The gradations you have, the modulation and the proportions of it are absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because I remember painting a skull when I was quite young. And you can see when something's wrong because you're essentially painting somebody's face. If the proportion's slightly off, it will be off in a skull as well. But yours are perfect. And then I love the technique you used in the oil painting of the skull, because you used sort of like an impasto paint on the forehead area, on the cranium, and everything else sort of drifts back into this softness. Where does that come from, that style? Because I would imagine that the inclination is to make everything pin sharp. That's what I do when I'm painting. Whereas you're able to sort of just create this amazing sense of depth through the technique, which I find it absolutely magical.
Yeah, well, that's quite interesting. I mean, the more you look at paintings, especially, I guess starting from the Renaissance, but really into the 17th century, with people like Rembrandt, obviously, he's the sense of differentiation of texture and differentiation of thick impasto and thin glazing really becomes a feature of painting. And it's quite interesting when you sort of learn to draw in this classical way. You think about form and how light and shade reveal form, and you might spend a lot of time doing that with pencil drawings or with charcoal. Maybe a year or something just drawing, and then you think about using it in paint, and the idea is that you use transparent paint for the shadows and opaque paint for the lights, because light actually behaves differently with different paint films. So a film of transparent color, the light actually passes through the paint film, bounces off the white ground underneath, and bounces back to your eye. So you're seeing through it like a stained glass. There's a sort of transparency and a permeability to it, whereas an opaque paint, like something with a lot of white in it or a thick impasto, you put the brush mark on and the light can't penetrate through it, it bounces off. And so it's much more on the surface, and it's in your world. So it's much more forward and kind of dense, and I suppose has more tactility to it. So you can really use these things to enhance the sense of illusionism and form. So that's something I'm conscious of doing, and I really enjoy like using texture more now. I realized maybe a few years ago I was just trying to think about tone and form and the illusion of it, but now I'm trying to use texture to enhance the illusion, and also to make it look like a painting and not look like a photograph, because I think that's a big problem in today's world, that we're surrounded by photographs, and paintings are not photographs, they're physical things. So.
Well, the worst thing anybody can say, I think, to a serious artist is, oh, it looks just like a photograph. Or they see a photograph and they say, you should paint it. Think,
yeah, absolutely.
I always
cringe. It's meant as a compliment, but it's really not a compliment. If they say that, I think, well, either you're not looking or I've failed. It's one of the two.
Exactly. But you are extremely good in explaining these techniques. But you lead workshops, don't you? I've noticed.
Yeah, I teach workshops occasionally. Yeah, I've got a couple coming up in Australia this year. Yeah. I've got one coming up in Sydney in June, one in Brisbane in May, and one in Townsville in May. It's all on my website if people are interested.
Where's Townsville? Is that near Brisbane, or is that near Sydney?
Townsville's actually near Cairns, where I live. It's north Queensland, so the north of Australia. I can sort of drive there in 5 hours, which is, by Australian standards, is very close.
So. Only 5 hours.
Only 5 hours, yeah. And there's not much in between.
Well, that's what I'm going to put your website again on the screen. Because I think you talk about these workshops, don't you, on the website?
Yeah, I use sort of Instagram to promote things, and Facebook, but yeah, all the information's on the website, and you can book on the website for the workshops. So yeah, it's all on there.
And you've got to follow Andrew.
But yeah,
we have got a bit of a delay, but we're doing pretty well.
Painting is something that, as you know, you're a painter. You know that it's. You can never get to the bottom of it. You dedicate your life to it, and it just keeps opening up new realms of possibility.
I feel as though I'm literally just starting now, and especially after seeing your work, what I really regret is not doing more portraits and figure studies. I desperately want to paint in a big sort of swaggery style, painting figures and drapes in a sort of, like Veronese and Titian.
Oh, yeah.
And also I think as you get older, as you've just said, you discover what you can do with paint. You're learning for 20, 30 years how to use oil paint especially. And it seems to be second nature to you, but then you realize you may encounter another artist and you just think, oh my gosh, if only I'd used big thick brushes and scumbled things on, and then turned the paintbrush around and scratched out. It's endless. I think I feel as though I would have liked to have had 6 lives just painting solidly in order to achieve the effects which I feel as though I'm capable of, but it takes decades and decades, doesn't it?
It does, to learn these techniques. Absolutely. And like you said, it's sort of a dialogue between you and the world and all the painters of the past who have produced great paintings.
Yes.
And they speak to you if you know how to read the language. And seeing a painting or a group of paintings by a great artist, it can transform your whole practice. Like you think differently about how to approach painting. In a dramatic way.
Yes.
It's happened to me before, looking at paintings in museums, where I'll sort of pay attention to the ones that.
Can you think of any examples? Can you think of any examples of that where you've encountered a painting you think is great, and you suddenly thought, actually, I'm going to change a little bit of direction?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. It's happened a few times. I mean, I remember seeing the two examples I can think of are both in the Uffizi in Florence. There's a painting by Veronese in the Uffizi, which is it's a female saint. It might be Saint Cecilia or somebody, and the Virgin and Child. It's not a big painting, but the color scheme is kind of sort of yellowy, brown, beige, gold, slightly orange. I mean, it's all within the same sort of color family, but the subtlety of skin tone and fabric, it just has this amazing harmony to it, and the sort of textural qualities of that really it's just right. You know, you look at it and you feel
I'm glad you mentioned Veronese. Obviously, we're both painters, and we both have this. We're drawn to similar painters in some ways.
Sure.
That Veronese, there's a wonderful one at the National Gallery. I think it was the very first painting that was put into the National Gallery.
Is that the Adoration of the Magi? Is that the one you're thinking of?
I do love that one. That's a vertical form. It's in the same room to the right, and it's a family petitioning to a king. I'm trying to remember. He's got fabulous tights on. There's a whole figure study.
Oh, I know that one. That's I think that's
side.
Alexander and Darius. I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So I think with Veronese,
it is. I've spent hours in front of
with
that.
Veronese, he really. He's able to include so many colours and so many contrasting colours within the whole painting, but it all works in harmony. And nothing's jarring or discordant. He manages to have enough neutral colour for all those things to exist. It's really wonderful. Yeah.
That's something I was going to talk to you about, composition, because there are a lot of these new liberal arts colleges and wonderful teaching institutions like the Florence Academy of Art and the place you studied at in New York, which you can tell me a bit about.
I will,
And my feeling was that a lot of them concentrate on the technique, but painting, say, a head or a head and shoulders, almost like it's a still life.
A still life, yeah, sure.
And I haven't really seen very much compositional tuition going on. And I suppose that's very much led by fashion and the period in which the paintings are created. But my feeling is that, you know, paintings that have, I suppose history paintings, the figures have to interact, don't they, theatrically? Yeah. And you don't see a lot of that taught in not modern art schools, but art schools that are teaching the traditional techniques. Have you noticed that?
I definitely have. And when I was there, we all spoke about it as well, because it felt like a missing element.
Did you?
I feel, yeah, it's a bit of a shame that so much of the teaching has been lost. I mean, anyone who's gone to a normal art school will realize that you don't even really learn to draw the figure or anything. But there's been a few good, you know, I guess academic revival schools that have started up, and I went to one at Grand Central Academy, or Grand Central Atelier. That's in New York. I spent 3 years there, full time studying. But yeah, you're right. The emphasis is on painting figures from life, painting portraits, drawing, there's some still life and things like that. But yeah, the idea of those figures serving a narrative or interacting with each other in a scene, I think you need another several years of studying to do that. And it would be nice if it was all done in one place, but it's not really. I feel like illustrators do a better job of that. You know, the illustration industry, they do think about composition and color schemes and all things like that. So.
You're right. Yeah, that's always put on a sort of lower tier, isn't it, the illustration? But I love Norman Rockwell's work.
No,
I don't know whether you ever look at his work.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
Because I lived in America for a while. I mean, he came from a great lineage, didn't he? His father, was it N.C. Wyeth? Sorry, I'm talking about the other family, that wonderful, the Wyeths are very good as well.
Andrew Wyeth, N.C. Wyeth, and then Jamie Wyeth, there was another great American illustrator called Howard Pyle, I think, who taught N.C. Wyeth. I'm not sure who taught Rockwell, but he's from that same group of people. And yeah, you're totally right. I mean, the good illustrations from that time, they rival a lot of history painting.
They do.
It just so happens that they were used as book illustrations or even sometimes advertising, but they're using the same kind of compositional skills and things like that, which had gone out of fine art. And so there was a bit of a break, I think, and it'd be nice if those things came together again. I think that would be good.
Exactly. Well, that's what we're both sort of evangelists for, I think. Yeah. But I remember looking at, I mean, Rockwell, they did use
knowledge, I think.
Exactly, yeah. Because gesture was very important, wasn't it, in the classical age? When you hear treatises written on rhetoric and speech, they would explain how to hold your hand or how to demonstrate something within a speech.
Sure.
And those gestures you see in sculptures, don't you? Do you know anything about that?
I know a little bit. I think the sort of rhetorical gestures were quite a lot better understood than now. Like we look at these, you know, I think there are certain gestures that we look at and we're like, well, it looks like he's explaining something, but not really sure. But the viewers at the time would have known exactly what it was. If you read, what is it, the Alberti, Leon Battista Alberti on painting, he talks about composing figures and things like that. And you know, he talks about if you're going to paint someone who's making a point, giving a speech, you know, maybe he's got his hand out and he's touching his thumb or touching his finger and sort of listing points of what he's saying, and someone might be, you know, doing this, looking just quizzically at him or
thoughtful.
That a lot of these things were kind of understood, and I have a feeling that in theatre and tableau and even masks performances which were popular during the Renaissance in Elizabethan time, gesture conveyed a lot more without words. Like it was kind of a language of its own, which I think we've lost, unfortunately.
Yeah. But isn't it fascinating to investigate these things? Again, I'm just in talking to you, I'm reminded of this intoxicating effect of being in Italy, being in Rome, particularly for me. I think the best sculptures, the best frescoes, the best architecture is in Rome. Yeah. I mean, a few of my friends think, you know, they're more romantically attached to, say, Venice, and certainly the paintings in Venice are extraordinary. But I think in Britain, we don't really have a very strong sculptural tradition. We do have, London's full of sculptures, which of course the London Mayor's trying to remove. But
they won't be
on the whole, it's only when, either he goes or they do. But in Italy, because of obviously the climate's different, you're surrounded, it's like being in an outdoor museum, isn't it? Walking around Florence, for instance, is like being in a painting by one of those ideal city painters from the early Renaissance. Did you spend any time in Florence while you were, no, not while you were in your Rome scholarship, but you said you'd been to Florence before, is that right?
Yeah, I've been to Florence a couple of times. I was tempted to go because you went that time, and I thought, oh, it's not that far. I could go as well, but I was just in the sort of mindset of Rome as a, you know, I didn't want to disconnect myself from it, as I was kind of involved in the whole idea of Rome. But no, I've been to Florence a couple of times. It's a lot more sort of intimate city, and you feel like you can feel its exterior and you can take it all in. I guess it's on a more human scale rather than a colossal scale. But yeah, there's some of, I mean, they're brilliant Renaissance sculptures in the Bargello Museum. You know, there's Michelangelo sculptures. There's I think there's even Bernini, which is later, but there's Donatello and really wonderful things.
Well, my favourite one in there, that used to be the city jail, didn't it?
I think it did.
There's an enormous sculpture which was originally part of a fountain in the Medici Gardens, and it's by Gian Bologna, who is he's actually my favourite Renaissance sculptor, of Oceanus, which from every angle it is amazing. I mean, I would love the time to be able to go and study that and draw that, inspired by your drawings. I would love to just draw that from every angle, from every height. And the way that he's kind of balletic, he's got this sort of contrapposto pose, and it's all animated by the way that the hands move. These artists must have done a lot of anatomical study, mustn't they?
Oh yeah,
did they dissect?
Yeah, they did. Well? I mean, Michelangelo definitely did dissections, and Leonardo did as well. I'm not sure that every artist did dissections, but the knowledge was being shared within the studios, and there are ways to. They were definitely studying the skeleton, that's for sure. And if you study the skeleton and you learn the insertion and origin points of the muscles, you can figure things out. And you don't need to know everything. You need to know about muscle groups and things like that. But yeah, no, they were students of anatomy, certainly. but you know, living anatomy. It's the sort of like you were saying before, the sort of gesture and rhythm of life of the human body is evident in the musculature. But yeah, Bologna is famous for the, you know, every single angle is something new. You know, Michelangelo's sculptures, I think, are more frontal. There's a certain viewpoint where it works. It works best from one viewpoint, whereas Bologna and probably Bernini after him, they're really thinking about every single angle. So sort of
and Cellini, that wonderful one in the Loggia de Lanzi of Perseus slaying Medusa, I think is breathtaking. In fact, that's where I have my Stendhal syndrome moment.
Oh, really?
When I arrive in Florence and I go to the Loggia de Lanzi, I am in floods of tears. I don't know if you have this experience. I've had it more as I've got older, but I'll be in the presence of a great painting or great sculpture, and I am so overcome with emotion that I don't care who's there. I'm literally in floods of tears. I can feel it now when I'm thinking about that Cellini sculpture, because the patina on the surface of the bronze, it looks alive. There's something so spectacular, and I think it had that effect on the people who first saw it as well. You know, we think, we're in a world which is flooded with imagery, especially images of faces on screens and everywhere we go. Imagery was more discreet in the past, wasn't it? You would see maybe an altarpiece in a cathedral lit by candlelight, and you'd have to process up quite a dark nave in order to encounter these jewel-like colours. So I'm always aware when I'm in Italy that I want to try and experience the art in the way that it might have been seen at the time. So mentally I clear the space of tourists. I don't see anybody. There's no sound, and I just try and bond with the artwork as though it's fresh, as though it's literally just left the studio of the artist.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's such a great mindset to be in when you're looking at art. I think that would be great for everyone to do. Because you're right. We're spoiled. We've got one of my friends in Sydney, an art historian, and he said we need to go on a cultural diet because we're overloaded with culture.
Yes.
We don't appreciate it all. We need to look at less things, listen to less music, but really pay attention to it.
We do.
And you sort of get the core of it and the depth. But no, I've had, I guess we're thinking about Florence. I'm just reminded of going there and seeing the Medici tombs that Michelangelo designed.
Oh,
Night and day, dawn and dusk. Those are phenomenal. You know?
Yeah.
I remember contemplating.
Those are very frontal, aren't they?
I think it was the Knight. It's a female figure, and there weren't really any other people in there, so I had the place to myself. But it's this idea of contemplating the sculpted body, thinking about it as a piece of stone, and then thinking, okay, it's been sculpted, and you can get a sense of the thighs and the hips and the stomach and the muscles that are underneath that, and then you can get a feeling of the skeleton that's underneath that, and then you get a sense that there's a beating heart and a soul in it as well. You really do feel that there's a soul in it, and that soul kind of emanates through the form, and then you think to yourself, wait a minute, this is just a piece of stone that's been carved. How is this possible? It's incredible.
I know, but they are stylized, aren't they? I mean, the necks are elongated, and when I was being taught the history of art at school, I think my tutor said it was because perhaps it would be displayed at a higher height, and it was in order to account for the foreshortening. But now I'm inclined to think that these stylizations during that mannerist period, was done deliberately to just sort of to make things look slightly artificial, to make it very clear that you are looking at an artwork, a representation of reality, not reality. And that's why actually this is a different subject. That's why photorealist paintings tend to leave me a bit cold. I know there are a lot of very competent people who do that, but I like the imagery not to be completely transformed as you get in Egon Schiele's pictures, for instance. I don't find those particularly attractive, although they're very tortured, aren't they? But I do like there to be some sort of distortion, and that's why I'm really drawn to mannerism. I haven't been to Mantua, but there's a lot of mannerist art there apparently. I've got a fantastic book on
I think one of
frescoes and things.
One of Raphael's assistants, Julio Romano. I think he designed a lot of the frescoes in Mantua. But yeah, no, it's a really good point.
Yes.
I mean, I think what Michelangelo was doing in his later work, and then what the Mannerists, I guess you could call Bologna a Mannerist in sculpture, and then you've got people like Pontormo and Bronzino in painting. They were exaggerating, but to make things more graceful, to make things more beautiful, to make them more elegant. There was an intention of a certain kind of beauty that they were enhancing. And yeah, you're totally right that the idea was that we're not even looking at real people. We're inventing figures that are more beautiful than real people.
Yeah.
There was a sense of sort of artificiality about it. And I remember a nice description of the Renaissance and mannerism, because the Renaissance is known for sort of harmony, order, and balance, and that kind of thing. And the mannerism is known for exaggeration. The description was that during the Renaissance, artists would look at the human figure for knowledge, whereas in mannerism, artists looked at Michelangelo for information. So
really,
yeah, there was.
That's fascinating. How amazing!
Yeah, it's an oversimplification.
But for me, I don't know whether you have this. I don't know if you have this same experience, and this sounds a little bit sacrilegious to say this, but when you go to the Borghese Gallery, as extraordinary, as impressive as it is, people go there to see the Bernini sculptures, and I find those rather over shiny Bernini sculptures of.
They're too
I think
good,
you did a drawing of Daphne turned into a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is amazing. But in reality, it's very shiny, isn't it? I feel when you get to that level of Baroque, it's a little bit overripe for me. It's like a big bowl of fruit that's slightly gone. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, they're so good that there's not really much you can say to criticize them. But yeah, it's a certain kind of taste where it's almost too good. Where do you go from there? And I do know what you mean. There's an artificiality and a kind of sensationalism about it, which is incredible. But you sacrifice naturalism to get that, and you sort of sacrifice a certain kind of intimacy to get that. But look, it is incredible. But yeah, we all have sort of personal taste. You look at that for a long time, and you feel like looking at something a bit more sober.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of get back to normal, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I'm also now going back to the conversations we had. I remember sitting in the courtyard of, I think it was Palazzo Altomp, and we started talking about mythology again, and I mentioned Jordan Peterson, and he wrote a book called Maps of Meaning, which is less well known than the 12 Rules for Life, of course. But I think he spent a decade writing Maps of Meaning, which was explaining how archetypical stories and myths have carried forward truths and psychological discoveries really through civilizations, and they were used as illustrations, obviously, in paintings in a pre-literary period.
Sure.
And I thought that was an incredible contribution to psychology. It's like post-Jungian, isn't it? I don't think he gets enough recognition for that extraordinary work he's done on mythology. And I think you'd started watching some of the videos he'd recorded about from Genesis. He's been going through Bible stories as well, I think. But
yeah, do
you remember us talking about Peterson?
Really interesting work. I mean, he's become very popular, and I can see why people are connecting to what he's saying. There's a good reason for that. But yeah, I remember reading Maps of Meaning and being really impressed by this idea that there are sort of different levels of cognition. There's sort of ritual, and if you look at older societies, there are certain things they'll do that they can't really explain why they do them. They say, well, this is our tradition, it's just what we do, we've always done it, and then there's a kind of a reflection of the ritual, which turns into a sort of theatre, and then you get sort of stories built out of that, and then you get that's where sort of Greek mythology and even other myths come from, and then you get a reflection from the intellect onto that, which is philosophy. You think, well, if you think about the myth, which is based on the action, which is based on the ritual, and so there's different levels of kind of truth, which are, I think, guiding people on a good way to live and leading them, towards a life which is going in the right direction. And it's interesting because with the philosophical level, you can quite easily dismiss the mythological and think, well, we don't need that anymore because we have the intellect. And I think this was something that the Enlightenment has created a split in the psyche where rationality is favored above everything else, and myths, dreams, the emotions, the intuition, stories, these are put to the side as things that are sort of not serious and not important. But I think they are very important, and if you ignore them at your peril. And you see during the sort of 19th century, 18th and 19th century with the Enlightenment, there was a reaction which we call romanticism, which is people saying, "Wait a minute, you're ignoring a lot about what makes us human, about the human psyche, at the expense of pure rationality." In the French Revolution, they sort of got rid of all the churches and wanted to rename all the days of the week and turned that church into the Pantheon, which is a beautiful place to visit, but it's a secular church. It's a very strange place to go. It's sort of there's been a split, and I think we've talked about Carl Jung as well quite a bit, and I think Jungian psychology is very interesting in that it brings these things together. So it's sort of a scientific approach in that Jung was recording dreams. I don't know how many dreams he recorded, but it's in the tens of thousands over his lifetime, and using sort of the scientific method to write down common events and record people's behavior and things like that, but treating the subjective as important as the objective, because what we experience is still real. It's not it's no less real than things we can measure scientifically. And so I think that's quite a promising direction in that it values the intrinsic experience rather than just the external world.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the word revolution, and obviously that's a big theme at the moment. I feel as though we're going through a cultural revolution, where all of these old forms are being questioned and labelled as from figures of the patriarchy, or and works by dead white men are being, they're trying to raise them from universities' syllabuses. We won't go on about that a great deal because I want to be quite positive about this, but I'm reading a huge amount of Roger Scruton's work at the moment, who died around this time last year. And the more I read him, the more I realise he's one of the most significant writers of any type, let alone being an important philosopher, of our modern age. Again, very few books bring you to tears. His book, England and Elegy, and I'm reading another one on culture, modern culture. Literally, I have to reread the paragraphs over and over again because he's able to, they're poetic actually. Very rarely do you get a philosopher that's poetic. But the reason I'm studying him is because I need to do a presentation at the end of the month about culture and the arts for a think tank for the British government. What's the future of the British art and culture? And it's a massive question because the culture's being in the process of being completely transformed from something which was really a hand down from a sort of aristocratic sort of cultural legacy to one which is far more egalitarian. And in the process, people are trying to find their identity within all of this. Yeah. And Roger Scruton's interesting way of looking at it was that culture is inseparable from religion. And he says it very boldly, our culture came out of a cult, it came out of a religion. And so embedded within art and our cultural appreciation are things like reverence and a sense of awe and being sort of humbled by the experience of nature or the representations of nature. And that's completely absent now, isn't it? Culture's more a sense, it's a consumerist thing. It's something that you consume. You consume something, say, on Netflix or an exhibition, you go and do it and you buy some merchandise from the shop afterwards, which is really tragic. And I think what I'm trying to do through my Instagram page and through mylesleaTV is to encourage people to have this, to reconnect with the mystery and the magic of real culture. So for instance, if you listen to a prelude by Wagner, and if you really concentrate on it and erase everything else, turn all the lights off in the room and just put those speakers on, listen to a piece of Tannhäuser or a piece of Thomas Tallis, and let the music really speak to you and move into your whole being, it is one of the most powerful experiences that you can have in life. It's like a divine transformation, isn't it? It's so different from walking quickly with a few friends through a gallery and seeing things en passant. Oh yes, I'm erudite. That's a Titian. That's a Leonardo.
Yeah.
You know, that's a Carracci. It's very different from what we do. I think we have a great privilege in the sense we will say, I'm going to spend 4 hours just looking and letting this artwork speak to me. And when you do that, it's almost like a transpersonal experience. It can be almost, you can almost get high on the experience. I certainly do. I think that vivid emotion I talk about when I'm literally shaking sometimes in galleries. I particularly have it in Rome, but especially in the Uffizi as well. If you go in, I was lucky to go in last year. I got in for 3 weeks to Italy last year during lockdown. And I just had, everywhere I went, and I travelled on my own most of the time, and I'd meet friends for dinner. I have friends who work at the Florence Academy of Art, and another friend, Margherita Pandolfini, who lives in a palazzo that Raphael designed. Can you believe it?
Wow.
All the family have different apartments within it, and she works with fabrics. She studied art in London, but she also now does these wonderful sort of contemporary fabrics in Florence. But going back to Peterson, and who else did we talk about when we were talking about mythology? Because we started reading a few books in sort of common. You told me about who wrote who was the book who was writing about the
Eleusinian Mysteries.
What was that book?
Was
That's right, the Eleusinian Mysteries. We got into this in a big way, absolutely. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been fascinated by the Eleusinian Mysteries and the the hymn to Demeter, which you can get if you buy the Homeric hymns. There's a hymn to each of the gods, and some are like a page long, some are several pages, but the hymn to Demeter is quite long. It sort of tells the story of Persephone being abducted by Hades and taken down, and Demeter looking for her daughter, and she's the goddess of the grain. And she's so distraught and unhappy that nothing grows, and the world turns into a drought. She eventually finds her, but there are things that happen in the story which are quite interesting. She stops at Eleusis, and she gets taken in as a sort of not as a midwife, but as a kind of a nanny, someone to look after the prince who lives there. And when the prince is asleep, he's a baby. She sort of does some magic on him, puts him in the fire, so he becomes immortal, and then she turns into a bird and flies around a pole, which is in the middle of the. So there's all kinds of interesting things that are in that story. And then the queen who's the mother of the prince goes and sees what's going on. She says, "Oh, you're putting my baby in the fire. What are you doing?" And she says, "No, you don't understand. I'm a goddess. I've tried to reveal my secrets to you, but you can't handle them. Now I have to leave." And then she teaches the art of agriculture to Triptolemus, and then he travels around the rest of the world teaching that. So there's all kinds of interesting things that were going on. And if anyone knows about what happened at Eleusis, it seems like, I don't know if it was once in a lifetime or whether you could do it more than once, but you would go there and have some kind of vision of the goddess, and people would lose their fear of death. And Plato, Cicero, Marcus Aurelius, everyone you've ever heard of who's famous in the ancient world did this, and it lasted for 2,000 years. It only stopped, I think, in the 4th century AD. It was a very important, what they call mystery religion. You had to fast for several days, and you would have this experience of. I think it's a relationship of the Persephone dying, going into the underworld, and being reborn. And the grain is planted. You take the dead grain, you plant it, and it's reborn. And in the same way that your soul dies but is reborn, I think there's a connection between those things. The sense of the immortality of the soul in relation to nature and this goddess. And so it's very, like, the way that all these things come together is really interesting, I think.
I was watching one of Joe Rogan's broadcasts, and he had an author, the name escapes me now, but I'll put the book on screen.
Yeah.
It's called The Immortality Key.
Right.
I don't know if you've read that yet. But the theory behind that, I think the foreword was written by Hancock,
Graham Hancock,
who lives here in Bath. Graham Hancock, yeah. And his theory was that certain hallucinogenic substances were used in the ceremonies.
Yeah.
And with the Eleusinian one, I think it was ergotized beer. There's a sort of mold that grows on grain, which can be lethal, I think. But they made this sort of brew out of it. And in the book, The Immortality Key, I think the writer goes and persuades some museum directors to allow him to analyze the vessels, these craters, where the beer or the wine was mixed with this hallucinogenic substance. But I've just found that an absolutely amazing thread of information to pursue, because
it is incredible,
apparently
there was
and it carried on through. They even think that in the early Christians used in the ceremonies of the Eucharist, they may have used some sort of hallucinogenic material, compound, in order to sort of pep up the experience of the union with the divine. I mean, it's such an amazing theory.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I mean, I think these things were a lot more common than people usually think. I think the evidence for the Eleusinian mysteries is pretty clear as well, because there was a book written in the 70s by Hoffman and Gordon Wasson and the other guy's name, but The Road to Eleusis, which we've talked about, and they sort of speculated that this was what was going on. But I think it's kind of been proven now that there was some kind of potion that was drunk, which would create visions. It's very interesting, because we don't tend to think of ancient Greece in that way. We know about that kind of culture in South America and places like that, which those ceremonies are still in use. But we tend to think of ancient Greece as a lot more rational and Apollonian. But there was this other aspect of it, visionary and intuitive, Dionysian as well. And the Dionysian mysteries were, another side of that. But yeah, it's very interesting too. It just broadens your understanding of what Greek culture was.
But you do see those wonderful vases, don't you? They're normally Roman copies of Greek vases, where you have, it looks like a Bacchic scene where everybody's just drunk. But it's possible, perhaps, that it was a procession from it wasn't just an after party of a symposium. It could have been something that was taking place at a mystery school. Yeah,
I think so. I mean, the mystery religions are interesting in that sense, because you have the sort of the Olympic pantheon, which were the official gods of ancient Greece and of ancient Rome, and then you get the mystery religions, which are a lot more individually focused, and it's more about going on an inward journey and sort of reuniting your own soul with the divine. And that's you can see how Christianity emerged out of that world, because it is a mystery religion of its own kind. It's about the individual and that union, rather than just sort of going along with what the society tells you to worship. There's more of a direct experience. There can be.
But you're not just primarily interested in the Western tradition either, are you? Because we were talking, is it since you married your wife, or have you always been interested in Eastern religions and mythologies and traditions as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both, I guess. I've always been interested in it. I mean, I grew up with a lot of knowledge of Indian tradition, meditation, and things like that, and the sort of pantheon of Indian gods, and Ganesha, Krishna, Shiva, Durga, and even Mahavira and people like this. And so that these figures I'm quite familiar with, and you can probably see, I think behind me there's the paintings there.
Amazing. It's amazing, that picture behind you. Can you tell us a bit about it? It's absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've collected these statues through travels in different places. Some are from India, some are from Bali, some are ordered online from different places. There's some Greek stuff there. There's some Indian stuff. But I had a few influences. One of them was purely aesthetic, where I just wanted to place these statues and have light coming from the side and just have a sense of atmosphere and presence, because these they have a resonance. These sculptures, they're archetypes, and so they have a sort of coefficients when you look at them. There's a sense of presence. But if you look more closely behind it, there's a snake. You can see it around here. I don't know if you can see that. You can probably put an image of it on the screen from the photo.
Yeah, I'll do a close up.
But there's the snake biting its own tail, which is called the Ouroboros, which is often an alchemical symbol, and sort of represents eternity. Okay, and I'm calling this painting I'm calling this painting theogony. So the idea is that in the background is kind of this endless cycle of eternity. It represents time, and the serpent symbol comes up everywhere. You see it in Christianity, and you see it in Hinduism as well, where Vishnu is asleep on a serpent. He exists beyond time and space. He's sleeping on a serpent, and Lakshmi, who is the feminine aspect of God, is massaging his feet, and through the massage, the dream of the world is being created. And out of his stomach is Brahma, who's the creator God, and he's creating this world, and the world reflects her. So it's a kind of manifestation of the divine through a dream. So that's what we're in. We're in that right now. So that's so anyway, the serpent is there, but I actually got the idea of the serpent from reading Erich Neumann's book. And Erich Neumann was a student of Carl Jung. A great book called The Origins and History of Consciousness, which I think he wrote in the 60s. And Carl Jung actually said that it sums up his own ideas better than he could have. He said the advantage Neumann had was that he came sort of a bit later, and he'd read all of Jung, and he could sort of summarize it. But that's a really brilliant book if anyone's interested in this kind of thing. Where he talks about the different levels of consciousness, and what we have as consciousness is quite a rare thing, that we come out of the dream, and we're only recently born out of that. But the ground of it is the unconscious, and that's still there, and those symbols are there, and they rise to the surface in dreams and things. So I guess the idea with this painting was the emergence of these potential energies, which are represented as these gods, and so they have different qualities, and they emerge into the world from this eternity. So that's kind of the idea.
I've got two thoughts in listening to you there. My first thought is I'm sure viewers of this will agree with me how amazing it is to listen to you talk about mythology and art in this way. And it's so refreshing after listening to contemporary artists who seem a lot of very conceptual artists. It's such a cynical, such a thin frequency of information we get. And it's often, especially with the Brit art movement, it's all self-referential. It's all, about their pain and their previous relationships and the difficulty with it. It's so small scale. It's so depressing, I think.
Yep.
And yet there's this incredible wealth of culture and tradition and heritage which you find piled into your paintings. And the other thing I was going to say is, would you ever sell it? I absolutely love that painting. It's
I hope to sell it. I'm exhibiting this painting with probably about 12 other paintings in Melbourne in November, so October, November. So
really?
Yeah, if anyone watching is interested, they
can I have first option on it? Seriously, can I have first option on it? I mean,
sure.
It's so spectacular. I can see it on the wall over there. I mean, I just think it's utterly spectacular, and I do think that that set. I keep going back to that set of drawings that you did in Rome. If you could only have them scanned and made into perfect quality G-play prints,
I probably will do that.
Just adore them.
Those drawings haven't been exhibited yet. I was actually in the process of organising an exhibition at one of the universities in Sydney, who have a good classics department, and I've got a friend who was at the British School, and he was very keen to organise it. He's in Oxford now, but he goes back to Sydney. But yeah, this pandemic has really sort of stopped a lot of those things from happening. So
yeah, but it also gives for me. Well, it's given me the opportunity to set up mylesleaTV, which is something I wanted to do. Well, since I was for 30 years, because I started out in television,
You did, yeah.
and then I ended up doing an about turn and working as a painter. But so I'm really loving doing this. This has been a really good project for lockdown, even though I've been working on my commissions as well.
That's great.
But I love the fact that I do feel as though you're almost in the same room, and I'm as excited now as I was when we were in Rome. When we just spent every day just completely immersed in this cultural world.
Yeah, it
and
is amazing.
I went. You invited me for dinner up to the British School in Rome, which is next to the Borghese Garden. It was a really hot walk going up there, and we had dinner up there. And you introduced me to the lady who was the director, I think, but also Nick Linney, who I found was fascinating. I think he was doing his PhD at Oxford. That's right, at Christchurch. And we talked about his project, which was he was writing a dissertation or his paper on PhD paper on Statius, who was a Roman writer who described villas and country houses owned by sort of Roman noblemen, and it was a particular form of art called Ekphrasis. I think that's the word.
Right, yeah.
And he said that my work, painting pictures of country houses, was a visual ekphrasis, and Statius's descriptions of villas and gardens were a literary ekphrasis. So that was thrilling for me. At some point I want to do an interview with Nick and talk about that.
Yeah, that was an amazing.
He's Australian.
That was an amazing
as well. coincidence,
wasn't it? That he's doing his PhD on the very subject that you spend your life painting. It was really wonderful. So nice that you guys got to meet and become friends. That was great. I miss Nick. It'd be nice to see him again. He's from Australia, so I'm sure we'll see him again sometime soon. It was. It's an interesting genre, isn't it? The ekphrasis, because it's you see it in Homer quite a lot. There's a description in the Iliad. I think it's in the Iliad when Achilles is given armor. Who's his mother? His mother is a sort of minor goddess. His father is a human, but I think she goes to Hephaestus. I might be wrong, but I think she goes to Hephaestus and he makes armor for Achilles, and the armor is described in detail, and it's got all kinds of scenes carved into it, and different kinds of metal, and there's do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do, because I think there was an exhibition called Troy at the British Museum a couple of years ago, and there was a large silver, it looked like a big silver platter, but it was called the Shield of Achilles. From the Renaissance on, artists have tried to recreate this shield, I think, or try and find an image of it.
Yeah, because
I'm feeling it has a Gorgon's head in the centre. I might be wrong.
Yeah, no, Homer describes it in such detail, and he describes things that would have been impossible to actually make into metal. Like he talks about the hills with shepherds and their sheep, and their little farmhouse with a fire in it, and all kinds of stuff, and all mountain ranges and things. And then he talks about the different times of day that are depicted, and you really get immersed into this this image, and then he brings you back out, and you're reminded, oh right, that he's just describing a piece of armor. It's like a portal into another world that he's describing. And on that point, there were descriptions by Philostratus, who was a Greek poet writing during the Roman during the Roman Empire, but he would they're called imagines or images, and they're descriptions of paintings, and no one's really quite sure whether they are real paintings or whether they're imagined paintings. But artists have tried to recreate those, like Titian's painting of the Worship of Venus, which I think is in London, and the Bacchus and Ariadne. They are both imagined versions of those poems by Philostratus.
That's right.
So
they were called posies, weren't they? I think they're in Madrid at the moment, but I saw them in London, the National Gallery.
Right.
And in when we were talking about which paintings have really inspired you, Titian didn't really speak to me so much before, because it's quite a loose technique. I quite like the disegno of Florentine clarity and perspective. Yeah. But when I encountered these, a sort of diaphanous, translucent quality to the paint, which is truly dreamlike. Yeah. And these, I think there are 4 poses, maybe 6. And they brought them together for this exhibition, and there were very few people who were able to see it because it was lockdown period. But I noticed it's now, I think it's at the Prado, and those paintings made me feel like I want to use bigger brushes and to use thinner skeins of paint, glazes, so that there's a sort of mystical, magical. It's just getting the time. I'm like you. I'm always working on some project. I've got a couple of commissions on the go. They're house paintings. If you're painting architectural views, it's quite difficult to change gear and start doing
Sure.
something in a totally different style.
Yeah, it's hard.
But I'm gonna have to force myself to do it.
Yeah, it's hard to find the time to do it. You've just got to somehow make the time, because what is it? Art is long, life is short. That's how it goes.
Who said that? That's really good.
That's, I don't know. I think that's an old one. I think it's a it's not Cicero. It might be.
Art is long, life is short.
Who was Nero's teacher? The Stoic.
Oh yes.
It might have been.
Oh.
Seneca.
Oh, who was the Stoic who taught it?
It might have been Seneca.
Who was
I'm
it?
not sure.
Seneca. Seneca. That's right.
It might
right.
be.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, there are other little art phrases that go around in my head because my paintings take a long time to finish.
Yeah.
One is, no one forgets a late delivery, only a bad one.
Right, that's good.
Because my paintings can sometimes take about a year. There was another good one from Reynolds. I think that was Reynolds who said that.
Okay,
but,
yeah.
But you're super disciplined. I'm amazed by your production. I mean, you are, even though you have a family, you seem to be a lot more disciplined than I am, seemingly. You really get the work done, which I'm really impressed by.
Yeah,
and I've been looking at a lot of these still lives that you've done recently, which are really spectacular. What made you change? Because obviously you're not in Italy, but what made you concentrate on the still lives? Is it mainly because of lockdown, or what was the reason for that? There's a lot of lovely flower paintings as well, I noticed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to only do still lifes, but I mean, the exhibition I've got coming up is still life paintings. I've actually got 2 exhibitions this year, and they're both still life exhibitions. Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that you can set up real objects and arrange them how you want and observe them from life, because I always paint from life. I don't use photographs at all. It's always observed. So if I have a model, I'll have the model with me in the studio, or portrait or nude. It's always from life. And same with landscapes. I really care about that, like connecting directly with the subject. But I've become interested in composition with still life, because it does lack the human figure, but you can do a lot with pattern, color, contrast, texture, scale. There's a lot you can do. It's kind of a world in its own. And I'm not so interested in genres like painting food and things like that. I'm more interested in sculptures, ceramics, fabrics, things that are works of art in themselves, arranged in that way.
They are spectacular. I was looking at them in detail on a large screen yesterday again, probably for the first time, because you sent me some really high-res images, and you're able to create the different textures of metal and fabric in a way I haven't seen in an artist since I said the 18th century, probably some very good 19th century painters. But I mean, you are able to reproduce textures and even the skin textures in a way that I think it's so rare. Your technique is spectacular. I like to say positive things. My grandmother used to say, if somebody is flattering you, shut up.
I'll take the
But I really do. I want.
Thank you.
I really want people to look on the website as well.
Yeah, look, thanks a lot for that. I mean, I urge people to have a look at the Grand Central Atelier website or Instagram. I mean, that's where I've studied in a few different places in Sydney and mostly in Sydney. But when I went there in New York, I mean, I think that's where I really learned the things I was trying to learn. Which is the kind of drawing and painting that I do now. And if you go and see what those guys are doing, you'll see where. That I studied at a really good place with really good people, with a very systematic method. You go to a lot of art schools and you'll have one instructor on Monday and he'll tell you to make everything dark. You'll have another guy on Tuesday. He'll say, "What did you do that for? Why don't you make everything light? Why are you using brushes? Why don't you use a palette knife?" And you get all kinds of different messages based on personal style. But this place I studied at in America, in New York. Very consistent approach, because everyone went through that same training, and the goal was to create this kind of, I guess it's like a 19th century approach, or maybe a proto-Renaissance approach to to reality, to the human figure and classical sculpture, and analyzing light and shade, understanding anatomy, perspective, and being sensitive to the world, and taking your time to really observe and really get it right. And I think when you do that, you can reveal something about reality and about nature that we're all aware of, but we don't take the time to look. And when someone does it in a painting, it gets revealed, and it's familiar yet it's new. There's a sort of magic about that, and I know when you create,
there is a magic about it, and I'm glad you're so articulate. I'm glad you were able to flesh that out for us, because that's exactly what I feel when I'm looking at those. I did look at Grand Central Italia. There is something magical about it. There's technically brilliant art, and then there's something that there's that extra special quality which makes it lasting. It makes it lasting with a perennial meaning and universal meaning to people. And I feel that you have that. No wonder you gravitated towards that art school. Can you just tell me these two exhibitions, exactly where they're going to be and what the dates are again? I'll just put them on the screen. If you can remember.
The first exhibition it's actually a group show at Lethbridge Gallery. That's in Brisbane. That's on I think it's the 28th of May, which is a Friday night. Starting then, that's going to be on for 2 or 3 weeks. I'll have a few, probably 4 small paintings and 1 big one in that. And then the other exhibition in Melbourne, which is a solo show, that's at Metro Gallery. And I don't know the exact dates, but it's the end of October into November. But I'll be announcing all of that. But that's so Lethbridge in Brisbane and Metro in Melbourne in October, November. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad I've got the exhibitions, because it gives me a direction and a deadline. And I would paint anyway, but knowing that I've got that pressure to produce the work, it's good. It gives you a focus, because it can be
amazing.
It can just float around otherwise, and you can make the work, but you don't know where it's going to head to. So I'm glad that's happening.
Andrew, I think we should do this again.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot more things we could talk about.
I mean, not the whole interview again. I mean,
sure.
I think we should, because we got into a habit of talking to each other once every 2 or 3 weeks on the phone.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I wish we'd recorded this, because we cover such ground, and I always feel so thrilled to be able to talk to you about these subjects. But there's so much that we've talked about privately we haven't got onto yet.
Sure.
And I think it'd be really nice, now we've established the connection like this, to be able to do some more programs. We'll see what the viewers think.
Sure.
But it would be really nice if people watching this would subscribe to the MylesleaTV website, not just to the YouTube channel, because there's always a chance, today, that the YouTube channels can disappear without any notice. And that's why I've created a separate website called mylesleaTV. And there's a section where you can just subscribe for free, and then we'll have your email address, so that if we do go offline on YouTube, I can let everybody know, or Ben Hancock, my amazing assistant, can let everybody know. And there's also more information on that website about my archive, which we're in the process of digitizing. It's an enormous archive with several thousand drawings and photographs from way back from my career, from the last 30 years. But I think the videos are in slightly higher quality on the website. So yes, don't forget to do that. Subscribe on mylesleaTV, and also subscribe on the YouTube channel, which is just mylesleaTV, all one word, and to hit the little bell symbol so you get an update. But I certainly think that because we've got such a good connection, we should do a series of these, and maybe talk about exhibitions that we've been to in the past that we really love, and other books that we're reading, because I recommend books on Instagram, and there are a lot of people who say, I'm building up quite a reading list. You've introduced me to that Wasson book on the Eleusinian mysteries. It's a difficult word to say.
Yeah, it is.
I just think I don't know very many artists. Well, I don't know any artists like you in Britain. So for me, this is an incredibly rewarding experience to be able to talk to you, literally across the entire world.
We couldn't be further apart.
Effectively, we're doing it through Skype. No, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I've absolutely loved speaking to you today. I've been looking forward to it for so long.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about it for a few months, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
We finally managed to do it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned. I think you mentioned the idea of it
in
like
Rome.
over a year ago. I mean, I think you were talking about a podcast
Yeah.
initially, and we were excited about that, and then again last November, and never happened. But I'm really glad we've got around to it. It's been a real treat talking to you. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, it's taken us a bit of time to bring all the tech together, and you know, the important thing I felt was that we did it in a way which, for the visual images to be really clear and crisp, because if I'm going to show images of your work, I want them to be very high res, and if you do that through a normal Zoom call, there's no way really that you can present things in this quality. So I'm glad that we took time to get all the gear together,
Sure.
and your wife was very kind in helping us to get everything sorted
Yeah,
out
we
today.
couldn't
Maybe
have
I'll be able
done
to.
without her, I think.
No, she's amazing.
Yeah.
She's amazing. It's a pity that I couldn't see her on screen, but apparently it's quite late there, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, I think. Let me see. It's around 11 o'clock. It's not too late.
Is it? Oh gosh. Well, but honestly, and thank you so much, Andrew. I've absolutely loved every minute talking to you, and we've definitely got to do it again.
Likewise,
We'll see what the response to this is. See what people think of what we've been nattering on about. But it's a huge honour to know you. I'm so thrilled that we made the effort to get together in Rome, and I do think you're one of the most inspiring people that I've ever met. So thank you so much for doing this recording with me. I'm just full of gratitude.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's really kind of you to say that. I feel the same way. It's been fantastic to get to know you, and I'm really glad we got to meet up in Rome. Yeah, I mean, Instagram's quite amazing in that way. We just have similar interests, and then ended up walking around looking at art and connecting. It's wonderful, and yeah,
It's what life's all about.
Terrific. Yeah, no.
Anyway, bless you. Bless you.
Bless you too.
And I'm going to have some lunch now, and you're probably going to go to bed.
I think I will. It's wonderful, Jonathan. It's great talking to you.
Well, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
And I'll speak to you again very soon.
Sure, absolutely.
All the best, Andrew, and best love to your wife and children too.
Thanks a lot. Good night. Bye-bye.